Welcome to this video where we'll be looking at the new and improved resynthesis process offered by Dawson Myth in the free update to version 1.5, which is now available. For a more in-depth look at Myth, have a look at my earlier video, which I'll link to in the top right corner of the screen. It's fair to say that when Myth was launched around 6 months ago, it was almost universally well received by the synth community. But if there was one criticism that cropped up from those who weren't 100% sold on Myth, it was that of the resynthesis method employed for importing your own samples. It's important to realise that when dragging one of your own samples into Myth, it's not simply for the purpose of sample playback, it's to extract timbral changes. This waveform can subsequently be transformed by the 2 rows of transformers underneath each iris, and that is the building block for Myth's unique flavour of synthesis. So in Myth 1.5, a new algorithm has been introduced that preserves more of the original timbre, as well as offering multiple playback modes. So if the earlier algorithm had you scratching your head or left you unimpressed by Myth, let's take a look at the new algorithm in action. And yes, the original method is also preserved as it still has its uses. However, I imagine most users will be keen to try out the new method. So to illustrate the accuracy of the new method, I'll firstly import a wavetable into Myth so that you can compare the resynthesis method to that of the original wavetable playback. For comparison purposes, I've set up Vital to playback a wavetable. In this case, it's a wavetable created by Signs of Life, who has some excellent ambient tutorials on YouTube and Patreon, so do check out his channel if you haven't come across it before now. So let's drag the wavetable into Vital and play it back. So what I've done is set up this LFO here to sweep through the wavetable over a period of 4 bars. So let's now import that wavetable into Myth and compare it. Remember, this is a resynthesis process, not simply a wavetable import. So if I drag that in, I can select from the method 1 or the new method 2. Again, I've set up an LFO at the bottom to sweep over 4 bars, triangle LFO, exactly the same as in Vital, and we'll compare the 2 together. This process obviously takes longer than simply importing a wavetable, as all the calculations are being done to resynthesize the waveform itself. So now we have the imported wavetable in Vital and the resynthesized wavetable in Myth, and let's compare the 2. So first of all, I'll play Vital. Now it is sweeping backwards and forwards through the wavetable, and now in Myth. So as I'm sure you can hear, pretty much identical. Those of you listening in headphones, you possibly noticed that the stereo on Myth gave you a wider image. So if you want it exactly the same, you can narrow it down to mono or open that up to give a wider stereo image. But that was for a wavetable. So how does a regular sample sound when imported for resynthesis? The answer depends on the source material, and that's where the different modes of iris playback come into play. Here's the relevant page from the user guide, which goes into more details, but let's hear it in action on a couple of samples. The first example is a sample of whispering voices. I chose this as it not only shows how the algorithm copes with a non-pitch sound, but also a sound with lots of dynamics over time. Remember, this is not sample playback, but a resynthesis of the sound based on analysis carried out by the new algorithm. So let's drag that in and click on Resynthesize version 2. For some reason that's much quicker than a wavetable, I'm not entirely sure why. As we're no longer comparing the sweep through a wavetable, I'll speed up the LFO to sweep over, say, a 2-bar period, which will more closely approximate the original sample. And let's check that back. So for a sound with a lot of dynamics, that's a pretty accurate resynthesis method. So let's try a more sustained sound now. I have a sample of a Logan string orchestra. Now for some reason that's an 8-second sample, I'm not entirely sure why. Let's drag that sample in and select Resynthesize version 2. So let's listen to that at, let's put it, say, because it's such a long sample, let's put it over, say, an 8-bar period to sweep through, and we'll have a listen. So again, I find that a very accurate rendition. If we simply sculpt the sound using the ADSR with a slow attack and a slow release, much like we get on the original string machine, and if we add a simple effects, let's just add a little bit of clouds, we'll instantly transform the sample into a pretty convincing string machine. So remember, the purpose of the exercise was really to example the resynthesis algorithm. So what we're listening to there is not sample playback, but an approximation of the original sample using resynthesis. Altogether, I feel this update elevates Myth to a new level that makes it easier to fashion and sculpt a wider variety of sounds, which helps to expand the palette of Myth and so appeal to a wider user base, as well as those working in a number of different genres. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It's free of charge and it helps me to create more videos like this one. A thumbs up always helps, and I'm interested in what your impression of the new update is. So until the next video, thanks for watching.